swore his heart would never feel again. But the moment he saw her smile, everything changed. What happens when two worlds are destined to meet, even when they shouldn't? Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The harsh Dakota winter had finally released its icy grip on the plains, giving way to the first tender shoots of spring grass pushing through the thawing earth. Morning Star, the respected chief of the Lakota Sioux band that had made their winter camp near the banks of the Missouri River, stood tall and stoic against the rising sun. His weathered face, marked by 45 winters and countless battles, remained impassive as he surveyed the awakening camp. 5 years had passed since the smallpox epidemic had claimed his beloved wife, Snow Blossom. 5 years since he had sworn never to allow his heart to feel such pain again. The memory of her death still haunted him like a restless spirit. How he had held her fevered body through the final night. How she had whispered to him to find happiness again someday. But Morning Star had made a silent vow as they placed her body on the burial scaffold. His heart would remain as cold and unyielding as stone. "Father," called a young voice, interrupting his thoughts. His 16-year-old son, Eagle Feather, approached carrying a freshly carved bow. "I finished it last night. Do you think it will serve well for the summer hunt?" Morning Star took the bow, testing its flexibility with experienced hands. "You have done well. Your craftsmanship improves." He handed it back, his words few as always, but Eagle Feather's eyes shone with the rare praise. "The traders will arrive soon," Eagle Feather said. "Swift Deer saw them yesterday when he was scouting. They're camped half a day's ride downriver." Morning Star nodded. The annual visit from the white traders was necessary but troublesome. They brought useful items, metal tools, blankets, beads for the women, but also the firewater that caused so much strife. As chief, it was his responsibility to ensure the exchanges went peacefully. "Tell Running Wolf to prepare. We will ride out to meet them today," Morning Star instructed, referring to his trusted friend and the band's most respected warrior after himself. As Eagle Feather ran to deliver the message, Morning Star's eyes drifted to the eastern horizon. Something stirred in him, a premonition perhaps, or simply the changing season awakening old memories. Whatever it was, he pushed it aside. There was no room for such feelings in his life now. He was a chief, responsible for his people's survival. Nothing more. By midday, Morning Star led a small delegation on horseback toward the traders' camp. Running Wolf rode beside him, with Eagle Feather and 2 other young warriors following closely. As they crested a hill overlooking the river, they spotted the traders' wagons arranged in a semicircle near the water's edge. "They have more goods than last year," observed Running Wolf, pointing to the heavily laden wagons. Morning Star's eyes narrowed as he scanned the camp. Something was different. Among the familiar faces of the traders, he noticed a woman with hair the color of autumn leaves helping to prepare a meal over an open fire. White women rarely ventured this far into Sioux territory. "Who is she?" asked Eagle Feather, following his father's gaze. "We will soon find out," Morning Star replied, urging his horse forward. As they approached, the lead trader, a grizzled man named Thomas Bennett, stepped forward with his hand raised in greeting. "Morning Star, good to see you again, my friend." Morning Star dismounted, his face expressionless. He had dealt with Bennett for several years and found him to be more honest than most white men. But friendship was not a word he would use. "Bennett," he acknowledged with a slight nod. "You have brought many goods." "Indeed we have, and fair prices too," Bennett replied with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Come, let us talk business." As the men began to discuss trading terms, Morning Star couldn't help but notice the red-haired woman again. She was tending to a young child who appeared to be ill, gently dabbing the boy's forehead with a damp cloth. Bennett followed his gaze. "Ah, that's my niece, Sarah Miller. She's a healer, trained as a doctor back east. Her husband was a doctor with the Army but died of fever last year. She's joining our trading company to provide medical care and to start anew." Morning Star said nothing, but his curiosity was piqued. A female healer was unusual among the white people he had encountered. "The boy is sick?" he asked finally. "Yes, little Jimmy, one of our wagon driver's sons. Been feverish for 2 days now," Bennett replied. "But Sarah knows her medicines. If anyone can help him, she can." The trading continued throughout the afternoon, with goods being exchanged on both sides. The Sioux offered buffalo hides, beaver pelts, and intricately beaded moccasins, while the traders provided knives, cooking pots, blankets, and other necessities. As the sun began its descent, Bennett invited the Sioux to share their evening meal. While such invitations were not uncommon during trading meetings, Morning Star usually declined. But tonight, something compelled him to accept. As they sat around the fire, the red-haired woman, Sarah, finally approached the group, the sick child now sleeping peacefully in one of the wagons. "The fever has broken," she announced to Bennett. "He'll need rest, but he should recover fully." Bennett introduced her to the Sioux delegation. When she came to Morning Star, their eyes met, and something unexpected passed between them, a momentary connection that caught the stoic chief completely off guard. "It's an honor to meet you, Chief Morning Star," Sarah said, her voice clear and confident. "Your reputation as a fair and wise leader precedes you." Morning Star found himself unable to respond with his usual terse acknowledgement. Instead, he simply nodded, disturbed by the unfamiliar stirring in his chest, a sensation he had not felt in 5 long years. As they prepared to return to their camp under the light of the rising moon, Morning Star cast one last glance at the healer woman. To his surprise, she was watching him too, a gentle smile on her face. The cold stone of his heart seemed to crack ever so slightly. "We will return tomorrow," he told Bennett, his voice betraying nothing of his inner turmoil. As they rode back to their camp, Eagle Feather moved his horse alongside his father's. "The red-haired woman has kind eyes," he observed innocently. Morning Star did not respond, but as they continued their journey in silence, he could not shake the image of those eyes from his mind, green as the spring prairie, and somehow able to see past the walls he had so carefully built around his heart. The following days brought an unexpected change to the routine of Morning Star's band. What was typically a brief trading exchange stretched into a week-long affair. The official reason was that several of the traders' horses had gone lame, requiring rest before the journey could continue. But Morning Star suspected another cause for the delay, one that both troubled and intrigued him. Sarah Miller had begun to interact with the women of the Sioux camp, offering her medical knowledge to treat various ailments. Her presence was unusual, yet the tribal elders had not objected. Her skills as a healer had earned her a cautious respect, particularly after she successfully treated Little Bird's persistent cough with a mixture of herbs and honey. Morning Star observed from a distance, conflicted by his growing interest in the white healer woman. Each morning, he found reasons to visit the trader's camp, ostensibly to discuss further exchanges or hunting territories, but his eyes inevitably searched for her. On the 4th day, as he approached the camp, he found Sarah kneeling beside an elderly trader, examining his swollen ankle. "It's not broken," she was saying, "but you'll need to stay off it for at least a week." She looked up as Morning Star's shadow fell across them, and a smile brightened her face. "Good morning, Chief Morning Star." He nodded in greeting, uncomfortable with the warmth that spread through him at the sound of his name on her lips. "I was hoping to speak with you," she continued, rising to her feet. "I've heard that your people have extensive knowledge of the medicinal plants in this region. I would like to learn if you're willing to share such wisdom." Her directness surprised him. White people usually took what they wanted without asking permission. "Our medicine woman, Willow Bark, knows these things," he replied. "I will ask if she wishes to speak with you." "Thank you," Sarah said, her green eyes holding his gaze steadily. "I believe we can learn much from each other." Later that day, against his better judgment, Morning Star escorted Sarah to meet Willow Bark, the elderly healer who had served the tribe for over 40 winters. To his surprise, the two women took to each other immediately. Despite the language barrier, with Morning Star translating between them, they communicated through gestures, plants, and demonstration. "She has a good heart," Willow Bark told Morning Star in Lakota, as Sarah examined a bundle of dried prairie sage. "Her spirit is strong, like one of our own women." Morning Star frowned. "She is white. Her people have brought much suffering to ours." Willow Bark's wrinkled face creased into a knowing smile. "Not all whites are the same, just as not all Lakota are the same. Judge the person, not the people." As the days passed, Sarah became a more familiar sight in the Sioux camp. The children particularly were drawn to her, fascinated by her copper-colored hair and strange clothes. Even Eagle Feather seemed captivated, often volunteering to escort her or carry her medicine bag. One evening, as the sun painted the western sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Morning Star found Sarah sitting alone by the river's edge, sketching plants in a small book. "You are far from your camp," he said, approaching cautiously. She looked up, seemingly unsurprised by his presence. "I wanted to document some of the plants Willow Bark showed me before the light faded." She closed her book. "Would you like to sit with me?" Against his better judgment, Morning Star settled beside her on the grassy bank, maintaining a respectful distance. "Your son told me about Snow Blossom," Sarah said after a moment of silence. "I'm sorry for your loss." Morning Star's jaw tightened. He had not expected this direct reference to his wife. "Eagle Feather talks too much. He's proud of you," Sarah replied gently. "But he worries. He says you've carried your grief like a heavy stone for too long." Anger flashed through Morning Star. "My heart is my own concern." "Of course it is," Sarah acknowledged. "Forgive me. I speak too freely sometimes. My husband Daniel used to say it was both my best and worst quality." A shadow of sadness crossed her face. Grief is a personal journey. Her mention of her own loss softened Morning Star's irritation. "Your husband? You loved him deeply?" Sarah nodded, gazing out over the flowing river. "We had only 3 years together before the fever took him. Some days the pain is still as fresh as if it happened yesterday." She turned to look at Morning Star. "But other days I can remember the joy we shared without feeling like I'm drowning in sorrow. Those days come more frequently now." Her words resonated within him, touching a truth he had been unwilling to face. "Among my people, we believe the spirit journey continues beyond death," he said quietly. "But knowing this does not ease the pain of separation." "No," Sarah agreed. "It doesn't." They sat in companionable silence as the last light faded from the sky and stars began to appear. Morning Star found himself strangely comfortable in her presence, the rigid defenses around his heart loosening slightly. "Your uncle says you will continue your journey soon," he said finally. "Yes, within a few days." "The horses are recovering well." She hesitated. "We're heading to Fort Laramie. Uncle Thomas has a trading contract there." Morning Star frowned. Fort Laramie represented the encroachment of white civilization on Sioux lands. Though the 1851 treaty had established boundaries, more and more settlers ignored them each year. "It's not my favorite destination either," Sarah said, correctly interpreting his expression. "But it's where we're needed for now. There are many sick people at the fort, both soldiers and travelers." Her dedication to healing, regardless of who needed help, struck Morning Star. It was not unlike the Lakota way, caring for all members of the community. As they walked back toward the camps, their path illuminated by moonlight, Sarah stumbled on an unseen route. Morning Star instinctively reached out, catching her arm to steady her. The brief contact sent an unexpected jolt through him. "Thank you," she said softly, her face close to his in the darkness. For a moment neither moved. Morning Star could feel his heart pounding, a sensation he had almost forgotten. Then, with great effort, he released her arm and stepped back. "The path is treacherous in darkness," he said stiffly. "Be careful." Sarah studied his face in the moonlight, a small smile playing at her lips. "Life itself is treacherous, Chief Morning Star, but that doesn't mean we should avoid the journey." That night, as Morning Star sat outside his teepee long after the camp had quieted, he contemplated Sarah's words. For 5 years, he had avoided the journey of the heart, believing that to feel again was to invite pain. But now, faced with Sarah's imminent departure, he recognized a different kind of pain emerging, the ache of opportunity lost, of connection denied. Running Wolf approached, sitting beside his friend and chief without speaking for several minutes. "You are troubled," he finally observed. Morning Star sighed. "The red-haired healer leaves soon." Running Wolf nodded. "And she takes with her a piece of your heart that has just begun to thaw." Morning Star shot him a sharp look. "You see too much, my friend." "I see a man who has denied himself life for too long," Running Wolf replied. "Snow Blossom would not have wanted this for you." The mention of his late wife from his closest friend carried weight that could not be ignored. Morning Star gazed up at the star-filled sky, seeking guidance. "What would you do?" he asked quietly. Running Wolf smiled in the darkness. I would remember that while winter is harsh, spring always returns. And when it does, only a fool would refuse its warmth. The dawn broke with a magnificent display of color across the eastern horizon, as Morningstar completed his morning prayers. His decision had come to him during the quiet hours before sunrise, clear and undeniable as the approaching day. He would accompany the trading party to Fort Laramie, ostensibly to voice Sioux concerns about treaty violations to the fort's commander. It was a legitimate reason, one that his council of elders had approved when he presented it to them. Only Running Wolf knew the truth that pulsed beneath this practical explanation. With a knowing smile, his friend had agreed to oversee the camp in Morningstar's absence. "Lead the hunt to the western plains if I have not returned in a moon cycle," Morningstar had instructed. "The buffalo will be moving north by then." Eagle Feather had begged to accompany his father, but Morningstar was firm in his refusal. "You will stay and learn from Running Wolf. A future chief must understand the responsibilities of leadership in all situations." Now, as Morningstar approached the trader's camp with a small party of warriors, he saw the surprise on Thomas Bennett's face. "Morningstar, we were just preparing to bid you farewell," the trader said. "I will journey with you to Fort Laramie," Morningstar announced. "There are matters I must discuss with the fort commander." Bennett's eyebrows rose, but he nodded. "We welcome your company. We'll be departing within the hour." Morningstar's gaze moved beyond Bennett to where Sarah was helping pack medical supplies into one of the wagons. She looked up, their eyes meeting across the distance. A smile of surprise and something more, something that quickened Morningstar's pulse, spread across her face. "Your niece's medical skills may be needed on the journey," Morningstar said, still looking at Sarah. "The trail can be dangerous." Bennett followed his gaze, a look of understanding dawning on his weathered face. "Indeed, we're fortunate to have her with us." The journey to Fort Laramie would take approximately 10 days, following the course of the North Platte River for much of the way. Morningstar and his warriors rode alongside the wagon train, scouting ahead during the day and establishing defensive positions at night. On the second evening, as they made camp near a small tributary, Sarah approached Morningstar as he tended his horse. "I didn't expect you to join us," she said, her voice carrying a hint of pleased surprise. "There are matters that require my attention at the fort," he replied, not meeting her eyes. Sarah smiled. "Of course, Fort Laramie has become quite important for diplomatic relations." The slight emphasis she placed on her words made it clear she suspected there was more to his decision, but she didn't press the issue. "Whatever the reason," she continued, "I'm glad you're with us. The journey is more interesting with your company." Before Morningstar could respond, she had turned and walked back toward the wagons, leaving him with a peculiar lightness in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. As the days passed, Morningstar found himself increasingly drawn to Sarah's presence. They began to talk during the evening meals, first about practical matters like the local plants and wildlife, then gradually about more personal topics. He told her of his childhood, of learning to hunt with his father, of the sacred vision quest that had guided him to leadership. She spoke of her life in Boston, her medical training that had shocked many men, and her brief but happy marriage. "Daniel encouraged my work," she explained one night as they sat near the campfire, the rest of the camp having retired to their bedrolls. "He believed women were just as capable as men in medicine. It was an unusual view. Among the Lakota, women are the keepers of the home, the nurturers of children, and the heart of the tribe," Morningstar said. "But they are not considered less than men, only different. Each has their path, their purpose." Sarah smiled, the firelight casting a warm glow on her face. "That's a wisdom many of my people have yet to learn." On the 6th day, disaster nearly struck. As they forded a swollen stream, one of the wagons tipped, trapping a young boy beneath it in the rushing water. Without hesitation, Morningstar plunged into the current, using his exceptional strength to lift the wagon edge enough for the child to be pulled free. Later, as Sarah tended to the boy's injuries in her medical wagon, Morningstar stood nearby, dripping wet but refusing to change until he knew the child would recover. "He'll be fine," Sarah finally announced, relief evident in her voice. "Thanks to you, he only suffered a broken arm and some bruises." She approached Morningstar, suddenly noticing his sodden state. "You're soaking wet. You need dry clothes before you catch your death." "I am Lakota," he replied with a slight smile. "We do not fear a little water." Sarah raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Lakota or not, you're still human. Even the mighty chief can catch pneumonia." Her concern touched him. "Very well, healer woman. I will change." As he turned to leave, Sarah caught his arm. "Morningstar," she said softly, her green eyes serious. "What you did today, it was extraordinary. Thank you." The warmth of her hand on his arm, the gratitude in her eyes, something shifted between them in that moment. Morningstar felt the final ice around his heart begin to melt. "Among my people, all children are sacred," he said. "I did only what was necessary." "No," Sarah shook her head. "You did what was heroic." She rose on her toes and, before he could react, pressed a gentle kiss to his cheek. Then she stepped back, a blush coloring her face. "Now go change before I have another patient to worry about," she ordered, her professional tone returning. Morningstar left in a state of pleasant confusion, his hand unconsciously touching the spot where her lips had met his skin. That night, he stood alone under the vast starlit sky, his thoughts in turmoil. The feelings Sarah awakened in him were both welcome and frightening. To love again was to risk loss again, a risk he had sworn never to take. "The spirits of our ancestors watch over us always," came Spotted Eagle's voice from behind him. The elderly warrior who had accompanied them was the band's spiritual advisor, respected for his wisdom. "I seek their guidance," Morningstar admitted. "My path has become unclear." Spotted Eagle smiled, the moonlight silvering his long white hair. "The path of the heart is never straight, my son. It winds like the river, sometimes peaceful, sometimes turbulent, but always flowing toward its destiny." "And if that destiny brings pain?" Morningstar asked. "Pain is part of the great circle of life," the old man replied. "To reject it is to reject joy as well, for they are two sides of the same existence." He placed a gnarled hand on Morningstar's shoulder. "Snow Blossom walks in the spirit world now. Her journey continues, as must yours." The next morning as they broke camp, Morningstar found himself riding alongside Sarah's wagon. She smiled at him, the morning sunlight catching the copper highlights in her hair. "Did you avoid catching pneumonia?" she teased. "The Lakota are strong," he replied with mock seriousness, then added with a rare smile, "but dry clothes are preferable." Sarah laughed, the sound like clear water over stones. "You should smile more often, Chief Morningstar. It suits you." As they traveled on, something new blossomed between them, a comfortable companionship that gradually deepened into unmistakable attraction. The other travelers noticed, with Bennett giving his niece knowing looks that she steadfastly ignored. 3 days from Fort Laramie, they encountered a small band of Crow warriors. Though not currently at war with the Sioux, relations between the tribes were tense. Morningstar rode forward to meet them, his face composed in the impassive mask of a chief. Words were exchanged, tensed postures gradually relaxing as it became clear no conflict would occur today. The Crow moved on, but not before their leader cast a curious glance toward Sarah, then back to Morningstar with a knowing smirk. "What did he say to you?" Sarah asked when Morningstar returned to the wagons. "He said, 'I have chosen a woman with hair like fire,'" Morningstar replied honestly, "and that such a woman will either warm my life or burn it to ashes." Sarah's eyes widened. "And what did you say?" Morningstar held her gaze steadily. "I said some fires are worth the risk." The air between them seemed to vibrate with unspoken feelings. Around them, the wagon train continued its journey, but for Morningstar and Sarah, time seemed momentarily suspended. Finally, Sarah broke the silence. "Morningstar, Chief," called one of his warriors urgently. "Riders approaching from the east." The moment shattered. Morningstar immediately returned to his role as leader and protector. "Stay close to the wagons," he instructed Sarah before riding off to investigate. The riders turned out to be a U.S. cavalry patrol, scouting the territory around Fort Laramie. Their leader, a young lieutenant named Parker, was initially hostile upon seeing Sioux warriors accompanying the traders. "These Indians are your escort?" he demanded of Bennett. "Chief Morningstar and his men have been instrumental in our safe passage," Bennett replied firmly. They travel with us to Fort Laramie on peaceful business. The lieutenant's eyes narrowed. Very well, but I'll be watching. He signaled his men, and they rode parallel to the wagon train, their presence adding a new tension to the journey. That night, as they made camp, Morning Star kept his warriors vigilant. The cavalry had established their own camp within sight, their campfire visible in the distance. They don't trust us, Sarah observed, joining Morning Star at the edge of camp. They have no reason to, he replied, just as we have no reason to trust them. Too much blood has been spilled on both sides. Sarah sighed. It saddens me. There should be a way for both peoples to live in peace. Morning Star looked down at her, struck by her hopeful nature despite all she had seen. Perhaps, he said softly, if there were more people like you, such peace might be possible. Their eyes held, and Morning Star felt himself drawn toward her, the desire to close the distance between them nearly overwhelming. But the moment was interrupted by the approach of Lieutenant Parker. "Miss Miller," the officer called, tipping his hat. "Your uncle mentioned you're a doctor. One of my men is taken ill. Would you be willing to examine him?" "Of course," Sarah replied immediately, her healer's instincts overriding any personal considerations. As she gathered her medical bag, she glanced back at Morning Star. "We'll continue our conversation later," she promised. Morning Star watched her walk away with the lieutenant, a strange mixture of pride and jealousy coursing through him. Sarah's compassion extended to everyone in need, regardless of race or circumstance. It was one of the qualities he most admired in her, and one of the reasons he feared losing her once they reached civilization again. Fort Laramie loomed just 3 days ahead, and with it, a decision that would change both their lives forever. As Morning Star looked up at the stars his ancestors believed were the campfires of the departed, he wondered what Snow Blossom would think of the red-haired healer who had somehow found her way past his defenses. Somehow, he believed she would approve. The walls of Fort Laramie rose from the plains like an alien structure, square and unyielding against the natural landscape. Morning Star observed the approaching fort with mixed emotions. He had visited this place twice before, once to sign the Treaty of 1851, and again to voice concerns about violations. Neither occasion had brought lasting solutions for his people, but this visit was different. Personal considerations now competed with his duties as chief, creating a conflict within him that grew stronger with each passing mile. Sarah rode beside him now, having abandoned her place in the wagon for a horse provided by her uncle. "Are you worried?" she asked, noting his pensive expression. "This place represents much broken trust between our peoples," he replied. "I come with words my elders have entrusted to me, but I doubt they will be heard." Sarah's expression softened with understanding. "Yet you came anyway." Morning Star glanced at her, allowing himself a brief moment to acknowledge the truth. "I had reasons beyond my duties as chief." A blush colored her cheeks, but before she could respond, Lieutenant Parker rode up alongside them. "We'll be arriving within the hour," he announced. "Chief Morning Star, the fort commander, Major Wilson, has been informed of your arrival. He'll meet with you tomorrow morning." Morning Star nodded his acknowledgement, and the lieutenant rode ahead to rejoin his men. "At least they're willing to meet with you," Sarah observed. "That's a start." "Words are easy," Morning Star replied. "Actions are what matter." As they approached the fort, activity became visible along its walls, soldiers gathering to watch their arrival, particularly the Sioux warriors accompanying the trading party. Morning Star kept his expression impassive, though he noted the hands resting on weapons, the suspicious glares. Inside the fort, they were directed to an area where the traders could establish their temporary camp. Bennett began organizing the setup of their goods for trading, while Morning Star instructed his warriors to remain vigilant, but avoid any provocations. "Chief Morning Star," Bennett approached after the initial bustle had settled. "We've been invited to dine with the fort commander tonight. Myself, Sarah, and you. A gesture of goodwill, he says." Morning Star considered declining but recognized the diplomatic importance of such interactions. "I will attend," he agreed. As evening approached, Sarah found him standing alone, gazing out beyond the fort walls to the open plains beyond. "You miss it already," she observed, coming to stand beside him. "These walls," he gestured to the fort surrounding them, "they separate people from the land, from the sky, from the natural world. I do not understand how your people can live this way. Sarah followed his gaze to the horizon. Many don't understand it either. That's why they keep moving west, seeking open spaces. She hesitated, only to encroach on the lands of others who were already living in harmony with those spaces. Her understanding of this fundamental conflict impressed him. You see clearly for one of your people. I've had good teachers recently, she replied with a smile. Then, gesturing to his traditional buckskin clothing, she added, Will you wear that to dinner tonight? Morningstar raised an eyebrow. Should I not? You should wear exactly what you choose, Sarah assured him quickly. I only ask because these military men place great importance on formality. They will be in their best uniforms. I am a Lakota chief, Morningstar said with quiet dignity. This is my formal attire. Sarah's smile widened. And you wear it with more nobility than any uniform I've ever seen. The dinner at the commander's quarters was strained despite Major Wilson's attempts at cordiality. Several officers and their wives were present, their curious gazes frequently turning to Morningstar. Some looks were merely inquisitive, others barely disguised their disdain or fear. Chief Morningstar, the commander addressed him across the table. I understand you wish to discuss some concerns tomorrow. Yes, Morningstar replied simply. Matters important to my people's future. Well, we certainly value peaceful relations with all the native tribes, Wilson continued, cutting into his steak. So long as the terms of the treaty are respected on all sides. Morningstar detected the implied accusation. My people have honored the treaty. It is the white settlers who trespass on our hunting grounds, who kill the buffalo for sport rather than necessity. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table, until Sarah deftly changed the subject, asking the commander's wife about her garden. Morningstar observed Sarah throughout the meal, impressed by her ability to navigate these social waters with grace. She belonged in this world in ways he never would, yet she seemed to hold herself slightly apart from it as well. After the meal, as they walked back toward the trader's camp, Sarah sensed his discomfort. You did well in there, she said. Those dinners are difficult even for people accustomed to them. Their words say peace, but their eyes speak differently, Morningstar observed. The commander has no intention of enforcing the treaty boundaries. They had reached a quiet corner of the fort, partially sheltered from view by stacked supply crates. Sarah stopped walking and turned to face him. What will you do? She asked quietly. I will speak the words of my people tomorrow, he replied. Then I will return to my band with whatever promises they offer, knowing they will likely be broken like those before. The futility of his position hung heavy between them. Sarah reached out, gently touching his arm. I wish it could be different. As do I, he said, his voice lowering as he looked into her eyes. There is much I wish could be different. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken feelings. Then, with a courage that matched any he had shown in battle, Morningstar spoke the truth that had been growing in his heart throughout their journey. When I return to my people, I would ask you to come with me, Sarah Miller. Her eyes widened, and for a terrible moment, he feared he had misread the connection between them. As the band's healer? She asked carefully. As my wife, Morningstar clarified, his heart pounding. If you would have me, Sarah's breath caught. Morningstar, I know I ask you to leave your world behind, he continued. It is much to consider. I do not expect an answer now. To his surprise, Sarah stepped closer, her green eyes shining in the moonlight that filtered into their sheltered corner. You don't need to wait for my answer, she said softly. I've known it since you saved that boy from the river. Hope rose in Morningstar's chest. And what is your answer, healer woman? Instead of speaking, Sarah reached up, placing her hand gently against his cheek. Then she rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his in a kiss that spoke more clearly than words ever could. When they parted, Morningstar felt as though a great weight had lifted from his spirit. He pulled her close, holding her against his chest as if she might disappear. My people will welcome you, he promised. But the life is hard, different from what you know. I've never truly belonged in Boston drawing rooms or military forts, Sarah replied, looking up at him. Out there with you, under the open sky, that's where I've felt most alive. Their newfound happiness, however, faced immediate challenges. The next morning, Morningstar's meeting with Major Wilson proceeded much as he had expected. Polite words, vague promises, and little concrete action. But it was the news that arrived midday that truly threatened their future. A messenger from Sarah's family in Boston had tracked her to Fort Laramie, carrying urgent news. Her father was gravely ill and had asked for her to return immediately. Morningstar found her sitting alone by the fort's eastern wall, her face troubled as she gazed toward the distant horizon. "Your uncle told me about your father," he said quietly, sitting beside her. "He raised me after my mother died," Sarah explained, her voice strained. "Put me through medical school when everyone said it was improper for a woman. He's the reason I am who I am." She looked at Morningstar, conflict clear in her eyes. "I have to go to him." "I understand," Morningstar said, though the prospect of her leaving tore at his heart. "Family duty is sacred." Sarah took his hand, her fingers entwining with his. "Come with me," she suggested suddenly, "to Boston, just until my father—" She couldn't complete the sentence. Morningstar's expression grew serious. "My place is with my people. I cannot abandon them." "It wouldn't be forever," Sarah pressed. "Just a few months, then we could return together." But both knew the complexities of such a plan. A Lakota chief in Boston would be a curiosity at best, an object of ridicule and prejudice at worst, and Morningstar's absence from his band for so long would be a dereliction of his responsibilities. "My heart wishes to follow you anywhere," Morningstar said finally, "but my duty binds me here." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. "So we must choose, duty or heart." The question hung between them, impossible to answer simply. As the day progressed, they sought counsel from those they trusted. Bennett, surprisingly, offered the most practical perspective. "The Boston train leaves tomorrow," he told them, "but I'll be returning this way in 6 months' time. If you're meant to find your way back to each other, perhaps that's your opportunity." That night, beneath a blanket of stars visible above the fort walls, Morningstar and Sarah made their decision. They would part tomorrow. She to fulfill her duty to her father, he to return to his people. But in 6 months, when Bennett's trading company returned, Sarah would come with them. If her father had recovered, she would join Morningstar permanently. If not, they would face that challenge when it came. 6 months, Sarah whispered, her head resting against his shoulder as they savored their last night together. "It seems an eternity." "For my people, time flows differently," Morningstar replied, stroking her copper hair. "We see it as a circle, not a straight line. Our separation is but a small arc in that circle, and it will bring us back together." The next morning dawned crisp and clear. The eastbound train would depart at noon, while Morningstar and his warriors would begin their journey back to their band immediately after. As the departure time approached, they stood together away from curious eyes, neither wanting to say the words of parting. "I have something for you," Sarah said finally, pressing a small object into his palm. Morningstar opened his hand to find a gold locket containing a small portrait of Sarah, her smile captured in delicate brushstrokes. "So you won't forget my face," she said with a tremulous smile. "As if I could," he replied, carefully securing the precious gift inside his buckskin shirt, close to his heart. From around his neck, he removed a small medicine pouch decorated with intricate beadwork. "This contains sacred herbs and a prayer bundle," he explained. "It will protect you on your journey." Sarah bowed her head so he could place it around her neck, the simple gesture carrying the weight of ceremony. "In 6 months," she promised, touching the pouch reverently. "In 6 months," he agreed, pulling her close for one last embrace. Their final kiss held both the sweetness of newfound love and the bittersweet ache of temporary parting. Then, with the strength that had carried them both through previous losses, they separated. Sarah toward the waiting train, Morningstar toward his waiting warriors. As he mounted his horse, Morningstar felt a strange mixture of loss and hope. The cold stone of his heart had fully thawed, replaced by a warmth he had thought never to feel again. Looking back at the fort, he saw Sarah standing by the train, her copper hair catching the sunlight, her hand raised in farewell. 6 months would pass like the changing seasons, he told himself, and when they met again, they would begin a new chapter, one where the daughter of Boston physicians and the chief of the Lakota would create their own path together, bridging worlds that had too long been separate. As Morning Star led his warriors away from Fort Laramie, his heart no longer felt heavy with old grief, but light with new purpose. The silent chief who had sworn never to love again had found his voice, and his heart, in the smile of a red-haired healer who had dared to see beyond boundaries of race and history to the man beneath. 6 months later, true to her word, Sarah returned with Bennett's trading company. Her father had recovered sufficiently for her to make the journey west with a clear conscience. When Morning Star saw her riding toward their camp, her copper hair shining in the sun, the smile that broke across his normally stoic face told his people everything they needed to know. Their wedding ceremony combined both cultures, Morning Star in his finest ceremonial attire, Sarah in a simple white dress adorned with Lakota beadwork that the women of the tribe had spent weeks creating. Under the vast Dakota sky, with witnesses from both worlds present, they pledged their lives to each other, two hearts that had known loss finding renewal in unexpected love. And though challenges awaited them, the continuing encroachment of white settlers, the prejudices of both societies, the uncertain future of the Sioux nations, they faced them together, their love a bridge between worlds that proved stronger than the forces that would divide them.